The subject that we're going to discuss at this point on the sadhana itself is basically a Vajrayana-oriented kind of topic, and it has a lot of implications at the same time connected with the basic practice of Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism as well. And generally, the first point I would like to get across tonight is some sense of, or the notion of devotion, in some sense, which is based on, the sadhana is based on that any kind of practice of this nature cannot be properly understood without having some sense of, if you like, hierarchy or some kind of teacher, student, guru, chela level of some kind, and its principle behind it as well, which is the most important one for. So we can't have those things unless that you have some understanding of a guru principle. So, I would like to explain the journeys that we're taking in the Buddhist style of practice of meditation, spiritual discipline on the whole, that we believe it is necessary to have some kind of babysitter to begin with, as we all do. That we would like to have our babysitter if we are, or some kind of parents also acting as a babysitter. We would like to have some kind of babysitter, so that somebody can change our diapers, someone can give us a bath, someone can give us a shower, or change clothes and put us in the pajamas, and tells us how to eat, whether to use spoon or fork, or how to relate with the cups and the plates, and where to sit, and also you're provided with some kind of seat called the baby seat. So that's the beginning point. I'm not particularly this point is coming from on a higher and some kind of arrogant level particularly, but if we actually want to function our life properly, as we begin to grow up, so we have to have some kind of starting point to begin with. As a child, we must have experienced ourselves that which was the case happened to us already, and the process of happening that way too. So this analogy of Thriyana principles is actually based on bringing up infant and relating with the teenager, and finally relating with the grown-ups. Those are the three examples that we could use at this point, quite simply, not further complicating the issue. So starting with the first point, which is the Hinayana, relationship to hierarchy, if you like to call it, or parental figure, which is the beginning point of the beginner's point of the journey that this particular sadhana is presenting in a very elementary level, somewhat. So, that sense of individuality and a sense of personal search for spirituality and a sense of a growing up process, whatever it may be, are based on pure dreams. The reason why I have said that is because we have to face the fact that we think we're going to become a PhD candidate, still not knowing how to write and read and speak and toilet trained. That's the kind of ambition that we usually have, is we don't want to be hustled by a little embarrassment here and there. Of course I can push them aside and I could just grow up. And as soon as I'm acknowledged into the mainstream of respectable, high-powered world, that we could do our best, and I'm sure I can do it. That's the usual attempt that everybody believes that professionalism means a self-confident, amateurish approach to reality, which is not quite true, actually. In this case, we're not talking about a professional Buddhist necessarily, but in order to become adult, that we have to grow up as adult rather than kid is being made into adult, particularly at this point. So we have to actually grow up, and we have to face the possibilities of problems that exist in our life, that we actually have to learn to grow up, learn to be discriminating, learn to develop discriminating mind, and we also have to learn to develop a sense of subtleties and sense of understanding about our reactions to the phenomenal world, which is our reactions to ourselves at the same time. So, the question begins that in order to do those things, we do need some kind of parental figure to begin with. In the Hinayana tradition, as they call it, Tevera, or the Pali term is called Thera, which means elder person, which means that somebody who already gone through the babysitting level of experience, and they themselves become babysitters already, are very much necessary, because we have to know if we put our fingers on the burner, what happens, and we have to be warned against it, or if we decide to step on the pile of shit, or decide to eat it up, and what's going to happen to us. And all those little details are seemingly unimportant or trivial, basically, but it does provide very important background that we have to learn the facts and the figures of little details that exist in our life. What is good, what is bad, what should be done, what shouldn't be done. And some kind of discrimination is important, not to the point necessarily to bringing everything to punishment and promises as such, or even related to the original sin of that Christian concept per se, but some kind of basic understanding of how things are done in connection with the natural force If we walked out into the snow without any clothes, we will catch a cold. Obviously, that's a natural fact. If we had eaten poison, we will be dead. And those simple little facts and figures are important ones. And spiritually also there are such things like that as well, that basically our view, we might regard ourselves, by the way, changing the subject a little bit, we might regard ourselves as grown-ups. You could say, well, I don't need a babysitter. I can take care of my business. I'm fine. No thanks. But in terms of spiritual discipline, even that reaction itself is very infant-like reactions. Absolutely. That you are closing off large avenues of learning possibilities completely. If we begin to reject those situations, then we have nothing to work with. And we have no idea of even to begin with the ABC level of basic spirituality at all. So, in the Hinayana tradition, the notion of acharya, which means master, teacher, elder, somewhat a father figure, and occasionally babysitter, parent figure of some kind, is always necessary. Not necessarily to teach us what's the good and what's the bad, how to hate the bad, how to work towards the good, but how to develop a general sense of composure. So that point becomes very important in the first step, which is beginning of a devotion in some sense. And at that point, in the Hinayana level, the devotion is not necessarily devotion in terms of necessarily faith in ethereal or visionary level as such particularly, but devotion and vision purely from the sense of practicality. What's need to be done? What is the necessary thing to do? What is the necessary thing to avoid? That's just a very basic, simple thing. So, in the Hinayana level, the teaching tells us that to begin with, our view to the world is also infantile view, that we think we're going to get ice cream every day, every minute. Each time when we decide to cry and throw our temper tantrums, that your daddy or mommy or your babysitter are going to come along with the colorful ice cream cones and to begin to feed you in. And it is turned out that that's not the case. And it's not so at all. So basically what we're saying here is that life is based on pain, suffering, misery. And closer, a more accurate translation for dukkha, which is a Sanskrit word for suffering, is turned out to be anxiety, anxiousness. There's always a kind of anxiousness. But you had to be told by somebody that life is a gigantic world of anxiety to begin with. So let's relate with that first thing, which is actually called a truth. It is a truth because if you begin to believe as possibilities that you can actually win war of combating with the given pain, that you think you might be able to get so-called happiness, and that's not possible at all. It doesn't happen. So our elder parent, or Thera, Stevara, tells us these facts and figures, that the world is not made out of honeycombs and big ocean of maple syrup. That the world has its own unpleasant and touchy points exist. And when you be told this truth, you begin to appreciate more, and you begin to respect that truth actually does go a very long way the rest of your life. And you begin to get some kind of paternal attitude towards the teacher, Stevara, or the elder. And as far as the Stevara, the elder, is concerned, that such truth is just old hat for them, because they know it already, they've gone through it themselves. But nevertheless, they don't make the righteous messages out of those things. Just simply, look, it's not as good as what you think. And it is going to be somewhat painful to you getting into this world. And you can't help it, you are already in it at the same time. So we better work with it and accept this truth. And that it is precisely, historically, Lord Buddha first proclaimed his Buddha Dharma. It was the truth of suffering. And we don't have to go through the rest of the Four Noble Truths, particularly. I think most of you might have some understanding of it already. Second stage level of developing further relationship with the teacher is a sense of understood the first section of the truth already, that the father figure has already been understood, and the father figure person does not become a hassle or overwhelming, unpleasant, in terms of claustrophobia of one's own development and understanding. And then we begin to evolve into a different kind of area, which is called the Kalyana Mitra, which is a Sanskrit word, literally meaning spiritual friend in the virtue. And the Kalyana Mitra is less heavy-handed in some sense as elder or parents level, but on the other hand, it is much more heavy-handed. It is like a rich uncle in some sense, who provides money for the rest of the family, including the parents. And it becomes much more significant to us because rich uncle doesn't want to have his relatives just lounging around and appreciating living off his money and just kicking around, hanging out, but would like to be more constructive, and he would like to have very industrious relatives so that rich uncle can promote his own capital, whatever, promote the whole thing. Although the Bodhisattva's approach and the Mahayana's approach of that kind is not so much based on the self-grandiosity and the self-centered technique approach as such necessarily, But there is still a sense of much more closer, in some sense, a friend, spiritual friend is friend. And when advice was given to us by relatives, that we have a different kind of attitude. You just be told relative truth. It has its conditions behind it as well at the same time. It has its applications behind it, but it's still relative truth. But when friends gives us advice, it becomes much more closer than relative like truth. It becomes more immediate, personal. For instance, if we're criticized by our parents, we think it's their trip or it's something wrong between us and them, so we take it very lightly in some sense, sometimes very resentful, so which helps us to push it aside. But if we be criticized by our friends, then we begin to get startled. We begin to think maybe there's some element of truth in this. So the Bodhisattva work, Bodhisattva's approach relationship in terms of teacher, is at this point as a spiritual friend, is much more demanding than purely relative level. It makes us much more watchful. Some sense conscientious. At that point, the relative truth becomes already somewhat old hat. We know that the world is pain, and we know the origin of pain and the cessation and the final path and everything already. But now, what's next? At this point, that spiritual friend begins to tell us, don't just purely work on yourself. Share it with others. Do something about the others. Relate to your projections rather than projector. Do something about world outside. And trying to develop some sense of sympathy and warmth in yourself, which is usually very hard to do for us ordinarily. That if we are already pissed off with the world, is painful and resentful with our world already, and we are already a bundle of muscles, very uptight, tight, and very hard to relax and let go of that. But it can be done. That's not impossibility at all. It has been done in the past, and it's done in the present, and it will be done in the future. So, the question is, how about giving an inch? Just letting go a little bit, open a little bit. Be generous, but at the same time be disciplined, and therefore you should be patient at the same time, and work hard with your exertion at the same time, and at the same time be aware of everything what's happening, and to be clear about the whole thing at the same time. Which is what's called 6 paramitas. Which is a tall order in some sense. That how can we already do all 6 of them simultaneously? And it looks like that we have to become either a fantastic actor who doesn't mean anything what he's doing, just purely performing, or else he just had to become an idiot who just purely follows the regulations, the rules, and give away things and be disciplined and patient and working hard and so forth. But there is also other possibilities that you can do that. And that actually puts us into a spotlight, so to speak. So there is a general sense of wanted to open for the very reason that you have nothing to lose. Your life is already a bundle of misery, chaos, and since that is the case, you have nothing to lose. You might gain something, in fact, by just giving, opening. That seems to be the trick, which the transition between the elder and spiritual friend takes place. Or the rich uncle who throws you into in the street, not giving you pocket money, and might give you a few pencils, saying try to sell them, and go out and sell it, do it. And you might say, oh, sorry, I need some warm coat. I can't go out like this. He will say, I'm sorry, you have to first sell the pencils, then you get a coat. You're going to buy a coat for yourself, rather than I'm going to provide you with a coat. You have to make your own profit, whatever. So that's a very rough example. Don't misunderstand that, but that seems to be the general trend of the pattern is altogether. And now the next thing is we're getting to a very complicated and very tricky point, which is the next level of hierarchy in terms of devotion, trust, and understanding of teacher. Is what's known as Vajra Master in the Vajrayana level, which is has a different kind of slant, but in some sense it is a combination of the first and the second one put together in some sense. It is the same kind of process, and some kind of line of thinking somewhat, but at the same time it has its own twist. The Vajra Master is not elder, parental figure, or not friend or spiritual friend or rich uncle per se. Vajra Master is a born warrior who accepts few students. And if students are sloppy and unresponsive and unnecessarily unreceptive, then the Vajra Master wouldn't accept such person. And the Vajra Master, Vajra is a Sanskrit word which means indestructible. Indestructible like adamantine. It's Vajra is Indian mythology that the scepter of Indra, the king of gods, Indian mythology, which is made out of, his scepter is such a powerful weapon that it destroys everything. Having destroyed everything, returns back to his hand, and at the same time, it has greater strength to not only destroy one situation but every situation, and it is indestructible because it doesn't have any cracks in its weapon, any possible bend, any possible way of destroying that particular weapon. So the idea of Vajra Master, the idea of Vajra is it's completely well put together understanding, vision, which does not have any cracks anywhere or possible potentialities to criticize, that is to say, to insert further confusion into it. So it's a completely well-guarded situation. Not well-guarded in the sense of paranoia, but well-guarded in the sense of its own existence, self-guarded, so to speak. And therefore, the closest analogies that we could use is samurai-type mentality, that such teacher is ferocious. At the same time, it has the qualities of father in some sense, elder in some sense, and also it has the qualities of friend, nevertheless, at the same time too. It could be a very passionate person, warm and powerful, sympathetic, but nevertheless, it doesn't buy any bullshit, so to speak, if you could speak Americanization at this point. Studying with such a person is very dangerous, but at the same time, very advanced thing to do, and you might actually progress on the path much faster. But if you start with that attitude of you might go faster, then you might go slower. On the other hand, the notion of Vajra Master's approach of teaching is concerned, and to create successive situations in your life. Having gone through the Hinayana already, and Mahayana already, and then you got finally to Mahayana, Vajrayana already, finally, and at that point that you are already well trained, well disciplined already, and the Vajrayana level, the Vajra Master begin to demand complete trust, unconditional, without any conditions, complete trust, complete openness, without any logic behind it, maybe some kind of little logic, but the rest of it is just simple and straightforward. Would you like to come along with me to take part in this historic battle? Come along, here's your sword. Of course, there's room to chicken out. But then once you have chickened out, it's going through a lot of, you could go through a lot of problems. Unspeakable problems. More you're a coward, that much that you be terrified, deliberately by a Vajra Master, although I don't want to particularly paint black picture of the Vajra Master at this point, but that is the simple truth, that the more you're trying to escape, you'll be chased, you'll be put in the corner. And the more you're trying to walk with it, then you'll be invited with a fantastic feast and celebration to share together in this dance that's taking place together. The basic notion is somewhat a celebration or feast type mentality, which is not so much of indulgence in the parties and things like that necessarily, that particular approach, or lots of eat, that kind of thing necessarily, but feast in the sense of real sharing rich experiences of all kinds together. And that is only Vajrayana teachings comes alive and become very appropriate, that if you are not in a position to see the real rich experiences properly, then you are not ready for it, that such Vajra master might send you back to your spiritual friend, or if necessary to your elder, to your rabbi. The level of commitment that you have with the samurai Vajra master is not so much of that person is actually external person as such alone. It has its own internal possibilities as well. I heard a report the other day that Professor Dr. Gunther talked about that towards the end of the Kalyana Mitra, the spiritual friendship is taking place, and then you already discover your inner guru. And I must contradict to that particular statement, and unless he's become a secretly love-lighting, in spite of being such a great professor, that's not the case. To become a spiritual friend, to work with a spiritual friend, is that particular level where you don't see inner guru level particularly at all, it's just a friend level. Then there's something beyond there takes place when you begin to meet a Vajra master, and then you begin to go greater level of a sense of heroism, a sense of fearlessness, and a sense of powerfulness taking place all the time. So at that point you begin to develop some sense of possibilities of that you could be your own resources at the same time. But such trip takes place longer, journey takes place longer, much, much longer than you expected. Because that will be the last thing that the teacher or the Vajra master would like to give you, any kind of trip that you might have a chance to reject your irritating and overwhelming Vajra master, so that you can purely internalize by saying, I don't have to go and face that person anymore, and I can just do it in my own everything, thanks everything. So that seems to be the interesting point. There's that Vajra master level is that there's some sense of magic, some sense of power, and also some sense of immense devotion, which is quite different than the devotion that usually we talk about in the theistic traditions, the faith and devotion towards Christ or Krishna or whatever you might have. But in this case, the faith and devotion is very much based on the sense of that not giving up completely, but taking on more things. Examples and insight and power and everything onto yourself, that you can be actually initiated. That's precisely the word, abhisheka, abhishekat. In the theistic tradition of faith and devotion, from that point of view, is a very remote one, that we have somebody out there all the time, not only a person alone, but that's fine. If there's another teacher, some other elder, parents, is fine, but beyond that there is also other, greater other, which will feed you, which will secure you, and everything becomes somewhat in the level of, as they precisely call it, ethereal level of the otherness becomes very transparent. That particular thing is going to save you, or that particular thing, maybe you don't believe as old man with the beard, necessarily so, but that particular thing is somewhere playing trick on us. The reason why that all the lizards were produced, and all the snakes are coiling themselves, and all the rivers run down, and all the trees are growing up, all this mysteriousness must be done by them, it, which takes away from understanding of real magic, that how can we understand them, how can we actually do it in our own way, rather than just, it must be their work. It gives some kind of sense of that the whole world is run by a gigantic corporation, including the weather. But in this case, we run our own corporation. According to the non-theistic tradition of Buddhism, that we have access to it, and the reason why we can run our own corporation is we have to have the manual and the systems, the techniques and directions that we might get from the Vajra master, who might actually put us into a very difficult situation if we are dumb and if we are not exuberant, if we're not enough, if we don't have enough exertions, and so forth. What's that?
If you maintain this cynicism up till the last point, then it seems you could realize that this person who you were putting all this trust in, that actually this could be another one of those self-deceptions. And then you might only do it out of a sense of, well, even if it was, it wouldn't matter anyway. Is that... I can see you through the camera.
Well, I think the question is that it works both ways, actually in some sense. That your critical input and the surrendering at the same time works together. They're not working against each other. That the more you get input and the more you get further development taking place, even those things are cautioned at the same time. So there is some kind of dance taking place between the teacher and yourself, equally. So you are not particularly just trying to switch off one area and switch on another area, particularly. It's, synchronized together. That should be possible. And it shouldn't be just purely kill or kill situation. Either you become very naive or just simply become terribly cynical about the whole thing and, just about to drop the whole thing. And that somehow doesn't have any kind of bearings. They have to be, working together.
Sort of flickering from one state to the other.
Well, there's a general sense of cynical attitude to begin with, and also a general sense of openness at the same time, another layer of it happening. So they work together simultaneously. So at the same time that what you have got, what you've received, is viewed as a great gift, appreciated, but at the same time how it's received is being questioned at the same time.